Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Education, Libraries and Lifelong Learning Cabinet Panel. My name's Terry Duris. I'm the Cabinet Member for that portfolio at Hertfordshire County Council, and I bid you all welcome, whether you are a member of the panel or whether you are joining and watching and listening in. Before I start the meeting formally, I have to read the following announcement with regard to COVID-19 attendance at this meeting. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Council will be holding this meeting electronically. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of the Council are asked to keep their microphones switched off until a call to speak and to switch their microphones off once they have finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. If you experience connection or other technical issues, it may help to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking in the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raise hand function. Use of the meeting chat function is exclusively for voting. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the meeting chat function, as I've just mentioned, by indicating for, against, or abstain. And I will declare the result of the vote after each vote. Breaks of at least 15 minutes will be held every 2 hours and will be taken after a speaker in the debate has finished speaking. If we are voting, the vote will be concluded before the break is taken. Other breaks will be incorporated as appropriate. I'm not aware of any membership changes to the meeting, and I'm going to go around and just ask members to introduce themselves and just state which party they are and which division they represent. So, Christopher Alley.
Hello, I'm Councillor Alley and I represent South Oxley and Eastbury, and I'm from the Conservative Party.
Thank you. Caroline?
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Caroline Clapper. I'm the Conservative representative for Watling Division, which covers Radlett, Aldenham and Elstree. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Judy?
Thank you. I'm interested that Clapper comes before Billing in the alphabet, but that's okay. I'm not precious. My name's Judy Billing and I'm the Labour County Councillor for Hitchin North. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Judy. Good morning, Judy. And in my defence, I am merely reading it off the sheet that was prepared for me. I'm sure it's been noted and it will be corrected for the next meeting. You never know, you might even get first dibs. Anyway, Lawrence Brass.
Morning, colleagues. My name is Lawrence Brass. I'm the Liberal Democrat Councillor for Bushy North.
Thank you. Fiona Hill.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Fiona Hill, Conservative member for Royston East and Ermine and Vice Chairman of this panel.
Paula.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Paula Hiscox. I'm the Conservative representative for Rickmansworth West and Maple Cross.
Chris Lloyd.
Yeah, just put my camera on for you. Thank you, Terry. I'm Chris Lloyd. I'm a Liberal Democrat representative from Croxley Green, and I actually took a book out of a public library on Saturday about impeaching Donald Trump. So I do support the library actively and have been meeting the staff and contacting the schools. So looking forward to the panel this morning.
Thank you very much. Jan?
Good morning, everybody. Jan Madden, Independent Councillor, Hemel Hempstead South East.
Mark Mills Bishop.
Yeah, good morning, Chairman. Good morning, colleagues. Mark Mills Bishop, Conservative member for Plumstead End and Turnford. Thank you.
Michael Muir. Michael.
Good morning, everybody. I'm a Conservative member for Baldock and a little part of Letchworth as well.
Thank you. Mark Watkin.
I didn't think I was so quick in the list. I thought I was before me. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Watkin. I'm the Lib Dem spokesperson for Education and Children's Services, and my division is Nascot Park in Watford.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. And I'm a Conservative councillor, and I represent the Bridgewater division that covers the Gadsden and the rural areas to the northwest of Hemel Hempstead. So we have no apologies, which is excellent. And so I'm asked to remind you that if you have any pecuniary or declarable interests as we go through the meeting, could you mention those or note those before we actually start that particular item? I'm inviting you now to agree the minutes, the part 1 minutes of the Education, Libraries and Lifelong Learning panel held on the 14th of October. If you agree with those, could you show in the chat box, please? For, against, or abstain. Thank you very much, everybody. That has now been agreed. Now we come to item 2, public petitions, and we welcome Mr. Willie Dunn, who is going to present a petition against the closure of Wearside Church of England Primary School in Wearside. You'll be aware, colleagues, that 376 valid signatures were received in support of this petition. And as a result, Mr. Dunn has exercised his right to present the petition at this panel. Mr. Dunn, welcome. You will have 3 minutes to present your petition. We will then move immediately to the consideration under item 3 of the panel paper regarding the outcome of the public consultation on the proposal to close Wearside Church of England Primary School on the 31st of August 2022. So without further ado, if you are ready, Mr. Dunn, please do start your petition. As I say, you have 3 minutes, and colleagues will know that I am very strict with the timing of this, so please don't go over the 3 minutes. So, ready? Off you go.
Yes, good morning, everybody, from the headquarters of the Wearside SOS, Save Our School. My name's Willie Dunn, as Terry's just said, with a D, just after Clapper. The SOS was formed to counter the threat to our historic village school, as you know, which has been in existence now for almost 200 years. We represent the pupils past and present, and all the residents and taxpayers of Wearside and our constituent hamlets. We've been operating now for some months and have been closely liaising with the parish council, the chair of the school governors and the headmistress of the school. By now you will have all read our 16-page report, which we tendered back in September, which gives a lot of detail for the reasoning why the school should be kept open. We've also sent a collective reply from the SOS in reply to your letter of consultation. Our report was entitled Elephants in the Room. We also, the members of the SOS, take it that everybody concerned with voting whether or not to save the school will have had a chance by now to visit the school and see it in operation. Now on to what we are asking for. It's very simple. First, given the huge urban development you have sanctioned on our land just over 1 mile away as the red kite flies from Wearside, we're asking for a 6-year moratorium on any decision over the future of our school. To destroy a perfectly good school with lots of history and potential without any guarantee of any new ones being built among the 1,500 dwellings due to begin there in the next 2 years seems to many people in Wearside rather foolhardy. As does the claim, and I quote from your report, which I came to back in September, that coupled with low pupil demand forecast for future years is just simply not true. Sadly, the numbers attending Wearside School have declined during the past 2 difficult years, and well, you may ask why you must. There are various reasons. One, parents at the school looking to send their children to the school are told automatically that yes, but next year it may close. 2, what message does this send out? Not only to have, as you called in your report to the Cabinet on the 20th of September, a substantive head teacher. Of course, we'd like to see a thrusting permanent teacher, which would help sell the school. 3, bad press by the way of letters to parents and all the negative reports in the local press, the Mercury and online, makes the job of selling places at the school extremely difficult. In addition to the huge potential customer base engendered by the tsunami of bricks, mortar and cars about to swamp our parish, the school
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Your time is up. Your 3 minutes are up. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that is it. Right, colleagues, you have heard the petition. We will now move into item 3, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the debate and discussion on the substantive recommendation in the panel papers. Once again, Mr. Dunn, thank you very much indeed for making that petition to us. To introduce the paper, I believe we have Simon Newland or possibly Kate Marr. So, Simon.
Yes, thank you, Terry. I mean, you're fortunate enough to have both of us, but I shall start the speaking. I'm sure members of the panel will remember this both from July, and then you will have heard about the start of the consultation in September. And just to remind you of the process, first of all, the council consults on whether to make a proposal to close, and that's the stage we've just gone through. And then after that, if it chooses to move on to the next stage, then there'll be a further consultation on the specific proposal. So first of all, it's whether to consult on closure, and then the next stage is consultation on closure. So the choices put to this panel and for Cabinet later this month are whether now to move to the second stage, in other words, to propose a closure. And if you do that, a decision would be coming back to Cabinet in the spring definitively to close or not to close the school. So that's the history. And I think you'll remember the background to the school, but in brief, it's the smallest school in the county. There are currently, well, there were at the start of September, 18 pupils on roll, and no new pupils joined in September. And it's worth making the point that we didn't, if you like, open up to public discussion the idea of consulting on closure of the school until after the end of the process by which parents could express interest for places in September. So the closure proposals didn't impact express preferences for September. And as it happened, there were no first preferences from the school for the school and no allocations for September. So the school is operating with very low numbers. Not all its year groups are full now. It has a prospective budget deficit of 70 to 80,000 a year over the next few years, and no real way of addressing that. And the challenges of educating, providing a good quality of education to pupils with such small numbers and with such financial pressures are very considerable. And certainly the staff have worked very hard to achieve that, but nonetheless, it's a great challenge. We have, as part of the closure proposals or the consultation process, identified an offer to all pupils currently in the school. In other words, they would all be able to be accommodated around just less than 1.5 miles away in Woodford School. And those who live in Wareside would be entitled to free transport there. So every pupil will have a suitable alternative offer, but of course some may choose to go to Ware itself, which is very close, and some may choose to go to other schools. You'll see the results of the consultation. The governing body has expressed its opposition and made a series of statements about the way in which it thinks things might have been different. But nonetheless, there's nothing in the response to the consultation which causes us to change our view that the school is not viable in the medium term. And certainly we respect and recognise the strong feelings and emotions that this issue has raised on the part of residents both in Wareside and elsewhere, and some of those points have been articulated by Mr Dunn in his petition. But nonetheless, as things stand, there's been nothing resulting from the consultation causing us to change our view about this school.
Simon, can I ask you, have we had a response from the diocese, because it is the Church of England school, and if we have, what position did they take?
The position of the diocese was that it supported the council in undertaking the consultation process, in other words, the process that we've just gone through, but it's reserved its position around the final outcome of the process against the outcome of both this consultation and I take it the next one, should you go to that step. And yes, so presumably if we go to the next step, which is to publish the statutory notice for Cabinet to authorise that, the diocese could actually put in a further comment in response to that. Is that correct? Yes, it could. And the logic of its response is that it would respond to that consultation, that final consultation. But as yet, they supported us in the decision to consult on a proposal to close, not on actually closing it, but have reserved their position pending the outcome of that. Okay, thank you. I know that as part of the consultation, there were a number of comments made and questions raised, all of which I think have been responded to in the panel paper. So, and I have to say that we are in, and I would reiterate that we are in still the consultative and the procedural aspect of this, and nobody ever wants to close a school or to promote the closure of a school. But I think sadly in this particular case, Wareside, the future, if it were to stay open, would be very, very bleak indeed. Let me take a question or a comment from Caroline Clapper.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hold on, let me just put my hand down. Yeah, I think it's always a very difficult conversation when we start talking about the possibility of school closures, and I can understand why locally nobody wants to see them. It troubles me to hear from Simon that the impact of a quality education is being felt at the school. But I think the two questions that I wanted to raise are really with my environment hat on, and just looking at the environment and sustainability. So this is to the officers. The first question is, I note from the report it says that there are 18 children on the roll. So I was just wondering, you know, schools being one of our biggest carbon emission outputs across the county, what kind of impact that would be having, only having 18 children within a larger school building that could house more? That's my first question. And the second question, just following on from the presentation from Mr. Willie Dunn, he makes reference to the new development that's also in the report, and I note that he's asked for a 6-year moratorium, which is quite a while away. But just to understand from a sustainable transport perspective, if this school was to remain open and 6 years down the line the new development goes ahead, is this school actually in the right location to have sustainable transport to it from the new development? I would just be interested to understand if it's going to be kind of, you know, right next to it, walking distance, so that the people moving into the new development would be able to benefit from that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Caroline. Simon, do you want to respond to those points, please?
Yes, thank you. In terms of the consolidation, if you like, of pupils into one building as opposed to two, that will clearly substantially reduce the kind of carbon footprint that the education of those children generates. And that's because, you know, Wareside as it stands is very oversized for the number of pupils that it's got, and it is in fact an old building and very energy inefficient. There will be some transport of children from Wareside Village to Widford who currently walk into school in Wareside. But as I said, the distance is quite short, and most of the children, I think it's most, but a very large proportion of the children that go to Wareside currently don't come from that settlement anyway. So a large proportion of them drive to school anyway. And so driving to a different destination will not necessarily impact their journeys. In terms of the development north of Ware, what we are planning to do is to include within that a new primary school to serve that development. And that is partly because of the scale of development and the scale of demand for places that will be caused by that development. Partly because people have a legitimate expectation in a large new settlement of that number of houses to have a school within it, and a school that is their local school and is a focus of their local community, and that they can walk to should they want to. We wouldn't expect many people to travel from that new development to Wareside. The way it's configured and the boundaries to the development are not going to encourage that kind of movement. But it's also worth making the point that there are, I think, something like 8 or 10,000 residents in Wareside, or maybe 15. There's a large number of residents in Wareside anyway, and a very small number of those, maybe 2 or 3, go to Wareside. So there's no reason to suppose that you know, a substantial but proportionately not that large increase in the size of Ware would mean that there would be a great flood of pupils going to Wareside. So I wouldn't expect that development, even if Wareside continued to exist, to make much difference to pupil demand there.
I think the point about the environment is very important, that we want to minimise, whilst we don't want to create sort of isolated developments in that context, but we do want to minimise and make the journey to the school as environmentally friendly as we possibly can, whether that be by walking or cycling, rather than a vehicle, a four-wheeled vehicle. Thank you, Simon. Let me turn now to Mark Watkin, please.
Thank you very much, Terry. Simon, I guess there's 2 questions that just come to mind. The current pupil number, I think, is 18. What would it need to be viable, if you like? What's the gap? And looking back, it had 46 not too many years ago. Is there any obvious reason why the numbers have dropped away so dramatically in the intervening period?
Simon?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to give a cut and dried figure on how many pupils the school needs to be viable. I mean, it depends on the age profile of the pupils and the cost structure of the school. I think certainly at a level of 40 or below, it's very, very challenging for schools to be financially viable. And certainly if you get to 80 plus, then they can be fairly secure. But our view is that Wareside is currently a long way below the threshold of viability. And its numbers have been in decline for some years. The decline started before COVID, and it's been continuous really for about 4 years, I think, period of time. And it has become, in various respects, harder for small schools to be financially viable. And that's because of changes in the way resource allocation has taken place. You know, that funding situation for small schools has become more challenging relative to the larger ones, and that's linked partly to the national funding formula. And it's also because the expectations of Ofsted and of teachers in terms of the way they teach the primary curriculum have made it increasingly difficult over the years to teach multiple year groups in the same class. So it's become more and more difficult to manage a small school successfully. And that's why maybe 5 years ago, Wareside was in a position where it was financially viable, but now it's well below that and not in striking distance. And as to why parents choose not to go to Wareside, well, the local population is not large, so the school has depended on people coming in from outside, and preferences change. And the reputations of schools do wax and wane locally, and it would seem, because no Wareside children applied for places in the school in September, that its reputation with the local community is at a low point.
Thank you, Simon. Chris Lloyd, a question or comment?
Yeah. I think both possibly. One either for you or Simon, and I think the rest for Simon. So one is, I was looking through the report and couldn't see anything from the county councillor, so I'd be interested to know what their views were. Then if we were to proceed with what the officers are recommending, obviously I see for staff there'll be either the possibility of redundancy or redeployment. I would imagine if they want to work, we have plenty of schools in the locality which will have opportunities. But then obviously there's the pupils, and picking up on both the environment and the travel. Have we looked at the, because obviously some of the pupils will probably move on to secondary school. Have we looked at each child and the impact on their journey to a potential new school? That's all. Thank you, Terry.
Okay. The local member, I think, is listening in. If he wishes to speak, then I'm sure he'll put his hand up. But he has been kept fully appraised of the situation. There he is now. I'll come to Eric Buckmaster in a moment if he puts his hand up. But before that, let Simon answer your question, Chris.
Yes, I think you had two questions, one about one about staff and one about pupils. And it's worth kind of prefacing this by saying that, of course, no decision has been made to close the school. We're in the middle of a consultation process. So all the discussions we've had with staff and the arrangements with pupils have been contingent on the outcome of this process that we're going through. Obviously, I met staff a day or two after we met governors to announce that we were going to propose to panel that consultation started. And clearly, it's something it's difficult for them to absorb and come to terms with. Many of them have worked in the school for many, many years, and we're absolutely sympathetic to the emotional impact of the idea of closure. We said then that we would offer support to each individual in terms of their different career destinations and their thinking about their future. We did hope that they would stay with the school and not leave immediately, because we wanted to have stability for pupils, and certainly staff have risen to that challenge, if you like. We said to them that we'd go into a more intensive period of counselling if and when the final closure decision took place. But I don't think you can have a kind of blanket solution for staff. Each individual person has different needs and aspirations. It may be that one person wants to take redundancy and retire. It may be that another person wants to move to a nearby school. It may be that a third person has has a considerable travel at the moment and therefore wants to work much closer to where they live. But we are working closely with all those individuals to support them in their thinking and their options we will do about their future. In relation to the children, I mentioned in my introduction that there's another village school a mile and a half away, Widford School. It's in the opposite direction to Ware, and it's about, I think it's about a 5-minute drive. It's not very far at all, but it can't be walked, and we will be putting on transport from Widford Village, from Ware Village to Widford. So in some respects, that's a similar environment. We've negotiated with the governing body and the head of Widford School that everybody currently in Wareside who wants to go to Widford will be offered a place there. And the two head teachers of Ware and Widford, Wareside and Widford, are arranging a programme of events and joint activities, some of which have started, I believe, so that the children in each school are able to get to know their prospective future peers and the environment into which they'll be moving. So we have encouraged parents at Wareside and said, look, don't just bail out in the middle of the year and seize the opportunity, just take any opportunity that comes up. You have this certainty of moving to Widford, and if you take that, all your children will be able to move with their peers to the same environment. So we hope that that will smooth the transition.
Thank you, Simon. Let me turn now to the local member, Eric Buckmaster. Eric, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Chairman, and thank you. Gosh, this is a really difficult situation. I think, as you said at the very beginning, nobody wants to see a school closed. So my purpose of being here is to listen to what the panel have to say. We have discussed this previously at Cabinet. I've met Mr. Dunn a couple of times. I've met some of the parents. I've been to the parish council to talk to them. I've spoken to the local rector. I do understand the difficulties they're facing, the financial consequences, the distance to go to another school, which, by the way, is undersubscribed as well. So, I am not here to make a decision today. I'm very interested to hear your views, but it's a really hard one, and I'm going to have to make a call when it comes to Cabinet a little later on in the month. Very, very difficult, and I don't envy anyone having to look at situations like this. That's all I want to say at the moment, but I fully understand the circumstances, and we'll just have to see where we go from here. But thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Eric, and I can only reiterate that I well remember about 20 years ago some schools closing, and it was always done with a very heavy heart. It's not something that anyone ever takes lightly. And I think I would also reiterate a comment that's been made that we are in the middle of a process. The final decision is not taken until March of next year, and it is the process that we are going through at the present time. Paula Hiscox.
Thank you, Chair. As a new member, I really didn't want to sit here and talk about the closure of a school, but I've been listening to the debate. I've read through all the papers, and 18 pupils is very hard to have a viable school. And looking at the new development, which would be 1,500 new homes, 1,500 new homes, the problem seems to be that it's at least 2 miles away with no safe route, but also we're going to build a school there where children will be able to walk to, which will be near their homes. My only question is, this is a faith school, a C of E school, and having been a governor of a C of E school, would there be places for children to go to a faith school if they were able to? Thank you.
Okay, Simon, a brief answer to that.
Widford is not a faith school, but there's a number of other faith schools in the locality with vacancies. For example, Tundridge, obviously not as close, but not that far.
Thank you very much indeed. Judy Billing.
Thank you, Chair. These situations are impossibly difficult, and I'm much closer to physically and emotionally to the one we'll be discussing later this morning. And I'm aware of the terrible dichotomies that have to be considered between the obviously passionate emotion of parents and governors who want their children to be able to go to the school of their choice, but also to do with A, the economics of it, and B, the quality of education, because there maybe comes a point where a better quality of education could be offered where there are more children to share it. But I wasn't going to speak at all because I don't know what the answer is to this. But I do just want to say, in response to your comment about this only being part of a process, I think that's a little bit naughty, because we know very well that once a process of this like this is underway, nobody really is going to decide to send their children to a school that is constantly under threat. And so it seems to me that once you've begun the process, or gone as far as this today, what's being proposed, you are basically calling a halt to the process as well. Because if I was a parent of a little one, I wouldn't send them to a school that I thought was probably about to close. And I just think we should be realistic about that. I don't know the answer, but I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Judy. I think it's worth just reiterating what Simon said, which was that parents would have made their applications for this coming this year, this past September, before ever there was any suggestion that we were going to consult on the future of the school. So I think that the numbers in the school are not representative at this stage, and I take your point that going forward, with that, if you like, that sort of Damocles hanging over people's heads, they wouldn't actually choose make a preference for a school. But it, as you say, it's always an incredibly difficult decision. Mark Mills-Bishop.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I echo your view there that, you know, it is a desperately difficult decision here today. I thank Mr. Dunn for his petition. I also refer members to my declaration of interest in relation to my wife and son. The only question I really had is, I don't know Wearside that well, and I assume that the school is at the heart of the community. What will happen to the building? Does the building belong to the diocese, or you know, what will happen to the building itself?
Simon, would you like to just comment on the ownership of the building?
Yeah, I mean, Wearside is a slightly unusual village. It's rather scattered about, so it's not as if you've got a discrete body of houses with the school sitting in the centre of it. It's sort of, I don't like to say straggles. It's over a fairly broad area. In terms of the buildings and the field, the County Council owns the field. The ownership of the buildings is the underlying ownership is the diocese, and then for elements of it, the council has a lease back, and in turn we've leased on part of the building for residential occupation to somebody else. So it's all rather convoluted. But we haven't, to be honest, we haven't directed much thought to the future of those buildings, because of course that's a kind of second order issue if and when we do move to the final closure of the school.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I'll come in a moment to Jan Madden, but then I don't see any other hands, and I think it's appropriate to move to the recommendation. So, Jan.
Thank you. Mine was just a very quick question, and it may be in the papers. I may have missed it. Sorry if I have. Picking up from what Judy said, I think it was Judy. Whether there's a local faith school, another local faith school, and it just made me wonder how many of the pupils that are currently at the school are there on a faith-based place, because obviously some children would go because it was their nearest school anyway. But I'm just interested to know how many of those pupils are there because it's a church school.
I'll see if Simon knows the answer to that, but one thing I would comment on is that I think there are a number of children at the school, and bear in mind it only has 18 children at the school. There are a number of children who are at the school because they find it comforting being in a very, very, very small school where you've almost got one-to-one teaching, and that thereby hangs the difficulty both in terms of the educational provision, but also the financial aspect of it, that you're looking at a one-to-one teaching potentially in a maintained school setting. But Simon, do you happen to know the breakdown of faith pupils there?
We don't know it, no. If a school is oversubscribed, if a faith school is oversubscribed, then depending on its admission arrangements, it can use faith as a oversubscription criteria. And if that was the case, you would know how many faith children there were there. But because this school is not oversubscribed, effectively anyone who applied to it can go to it. So we don't have information that's that sets that out.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Jan. Right, let us move now, please, to the recommendation, and I'm going to ask you to vote for, against, or abstain. The recommendation is that the panel is asked to recommend to Cabinet that it authorises the Director of Children's Services to publish a statutory notice to close Wareside Church of England Primary School on the 31st of August 2022. So if you could vote now, please. Elaine, I'm having trouble just typing in my vote, so just bear with me, please. I have voted. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. That recommendation has been agreed, and I would reiterate once again my thanks to Willie Dunn for his attendance and the presentation of the petition. We now come to item 4, the outcome of the public consultation on the proposal to close Hexton Junior Mixed and Infant School on the 31st of August. And you will see in the panel paper a change from the paper that you would have seen previously, where we agreed to go out to consultation, that there is now an additional recommendation, which is at 3.1 little 3, or in fact the last one, that says take no further action on the closure proposal at this stage in the light of the governing body's request to give it the time and opportunity to increase the pupil numbers. In presenting that to you for your consideration and I hope agreement, I personally have met, along with Simon Newland and the local MP and the local member, who we'll probably hear from in a moment, with governors of the school. They have actually convinced me that this new recommendation is the right one to go with. and they have a vision and a fortitude to increase the numbers going forward. They recognise that obviously the school still has to be sustainable, and there are challenges ahead. But I am comfortable, and I applaud the governing body for the work that they have done. And I actually, assuming that the recommendation is agreed, I would want to wish them well. But having said that introduction, and I hope I haven't sort of introduced it and gone straight to the bottom line, Simon Newland, would you please present the paper?
Yes, thank you, Terry. I mean, I won't reiterate the things that I said about Wareside, because in process terms and history, the way we've approached both schools has been similar. But there are substantial differences now after the consultation process that we've been through. I mean, one apparent difference in terms of pupil numbers is that at the start of term, Hexton had 31 pupils on roll, and Wareside had 18. So Hexton is, if you like, already substantially bigger than Wareside. And although it's in a situation of financial stress and with a budget deficit, it's a lot closer to financial break even than Wareside is. So it's in a stronger position to start with. And it also received 3 new admissions in September, so it remains popular as a place for children to express and parents to express preference for. The challenges of maintaining the quality of education remain substantial, but the school is full in every year group, which was not the case with Wareside. As Terry says, we've been to visit the school on a number of occasions. In fact, I've been there 7 times to meet with parents, staff, head, governors, public meetings and so on. And we've had a very extensive discussion with the governing body about their quite comprehensive plans that are set out in the response to the consultation about how they believe that the current difficult situation of the school can be turned around. And it's on the basis of the stronger position of Hexton at the moment, and the quality and commitment that the governing body, the enthusiasm that the governing body has shown, that we've set out the slightly different approach which Terry has talked to you about. And I don't want to suggest here that the governing body in Wareside has been any less passionate in its commitment to the school than that of the governing body of Hexton. But I think it's clearly the case that Hexton does have a much more thought through set of proposals for dealing with its challenges, and its challenges are, to start with, substantially smaller than those at Wareside. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Lawrence.
Chairman, thank you. I, like several colleagues, have been to visit this school, and I was very impressed with the energy and enthusiasm and commitment of the staff and the parents. And I'd be very tempted to go down the road of recommendation 3-4. But I need to ask Simon, please, what he means by saying at this stage to take no further action. What does that mean? Does that mean tomorrow? Does it mean next week? Does it mean next year? 3 years, 5 years? Can we have a time frame, please, so that we can make a reasoned decision?
I will try and answer that, and Simon may amplify it. Basically, we are saying we are not going any further with the closure. That's it. Now, I can't predict what may occur in 10, 15, 20 years time, or even earlier. If there were a sudden collapse in the number of children, a real and catastrophic collapse in the number of children who were attending Hexton School, then it would have to be reviewed clearly. but we have the confidence in the governing body and the staff and the supporters of the school, supported by the local member, that they will make every effort and they will work to achieve the goals that they are setting themselves. So at this stage is now. We are not now, in the light of the governing body meeting, governing body's request, taking this proposal any further. It will stop now. The consultation will go no further. Simon, did you want to add anything to that?
I think that's right. I mean, it's, as everyone knows, it's a staged consultation process, and we've got to the end of the first stage, and at this stage we're going to stop. And I think actually the intent, the government's intent when it created a staged consultation process was to allow this kind of debate, response, and and ending of the closure process at this stage. So I think the consultation process has worked effectively in this case.
I think also it lays to rest those sort of naysayers who say, oh well, what's the point of having a consultation? You've made up your mind anyway. We're going to close the school, full stop. The whole point of the consultation is to gather the views and to listen and to reflect, and that is exactly what we've done, and that is why the proposal, my proposal if you like, is to take no further action. There's a lot of hands gone up. I will take them in the order that they come up. So Caroline Clapper first.
Thank you very much. I mean, mine's not even a question, it's just more of a comment. I read with interest, there was quite a lot of correspondence actually from various people within the school community. So I read it all with interest. I read the report. I think this is a really good news story. It's nice to see a consultation that actually ends up with a happy, positive outcome. I think they've made a really good case of how they're going to increase the numbers. So all I really wanted to say is, firstly, I support the recommendations, and secondly, I personally wish the school and the governing body, everything positive with the outcome they're looking for. And I'm personally very happy about this, and I look forward to supporting this. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Caroline. Michael Muir.
Thank you, Chair. There's a substantial difference between Wareside and Hexton. I totally agree with the recommendation that we give them a chance and knock this on the head now. And I hope Cabinet will agree with that as well. So I'm happy to agree the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I would, if I may, just make a very gentle comment that I think comparisons can be invidious. And I would just suggest that we might want to just concentrate our comments and discussion on Hexton rather than relating it to the circumstances at Wareside, which are very different, but we are talking in this item about Hexton, and let's focus all our attention on Hexton, as indeed the governing body have done, and that's one of the reasons why the potential for closure is not going further. Judy.
Chair, I know I said this, excuse me, at the last meeting, but it'd be really good to hear from the local member before the rest of us. Could we?
I must confess, I was thinking that, and I didn't see David's hand go up, and I apologise. So I'm
That's
going
because
to.
you're so shy.
No, David, put your hands down, for goodness sake, man. No, it's a fair point, Judy, and I mean no disrespect to any local member if I forget to call them first. And I'll think of that in the next item when I'll call Lawrence Brass first, or after the.
Do you want me to carry on now, or do you want to call David now?
No, I'm going to call David now because he's a local member. So there. David.
Thank you. I'm not a technophobe, but I apologise for not putting my hand up mechanically. I've actually got out of bed this morning. I've got some sort of man flu or something. So excuse me for the scribbled notes that I've made, but I'm so heartened, almost to tears, with the comments that have been made so far. And I hope that this is still relevant. So since 1991, as a district councillor, then county councillor, a governor and a parent, both of my children went to this small school. It's a personal teaching environment. Both girls flourished. They went on to finish their education with top university degrees, and they both represented Great Britain in their sports. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The pandemic and lockdown created an unnatural situation for over a year or so, and the governors were also in lockdown, so there was no opportunity to promote or recruit into the school. The governors are supported by an excellent parent-teacher association, and they are, as you've already commented, so very, very professional in their approach and the way that they actually run the school. You obviously realise I'm passionate about this school. The pupils thrive in a lovely, productive learning atmosphere where every child matters. I firmly believe that the governors who have produced an excellent master plan and business plan going forward can make the school economical again. The sum of money being below budget at this time is a drop in the ocean compared with the education budget. I know, but that's obviously not such a consideration overall. So please don't give notice to close this school. It is a vital part of the community. The children would be split into 2 schools. Each is a minimum of 4.7 miles away. That's Offaly Primary and Purton Primary, and they're both pretty busy schools anyway, with new developments having gone around them, and Purton still being under construction with more houses. That means that those children who had to travel out of the village would have to go at county expense in taxis. So that's obviously going to cost the county a little bit of money. So children will also be split and become separated on holiday friendships, and they'll also be prevented from after-school activities. Well, we all know how very, very important they are. My children went on to international standards by being able to train and communicate after school. But of course, they wouldn't be able to do that if a taxi was waiting outside the school. So, in so many words, and I apologise if I'm stumbling a little bit because I'm so happy that what might happen. The families in the school, parents would become fragmented in their social lives as well, because they would obviously go towards where the children are at school and make friendships there. So I'm begging for a stay of execution to allow the governors to prove that the school can be economic again, and I am absolutely confident that they can. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And now we return live to Hitchin and Judy Billing.
Thank you very much, Terry. I share part of a divisional boundary with David, but have also been interested in the fate of the village schools around Hitchin for a very long time, because although people find this really hard to believe, Hitchin Rural was actually represented throughout the 1980s and some of the 90s by a Labour County Councillor. Can you believe that? Actually, by 2 Labour County Councillors who are not unknown to the problems of village schools. Now, it's a dilemma for me because I understand when I've got an 11-year-old grandson who was born in 2010 as one of the biggest cohorts ever known to the history of Hertfordshire education, that when he went to school just a few miles away from Hexton, he was clubbed into a sudden three form of entry, very crowded schools with a lot of children, too many really for the sort of education you would have wanted them to have had. And so it is difficult to justify very small schools at the same time as this is going on only a few miles away with very large ones. But I've also had the privilege of visiting Hexton in the last few weeks. I've seen the absolute determination and joy amongst governors, teachers, parents, and most importantly to me, actually, the children. And I completely commend Hexton School on its dog policy, which allowed me to take Pedro with me as well, which was very nice. But the other extra point I would make for Hexton School is that it is actually completely on the border of another county. And I think there is still potential for looking at what happens with some of the children just over the border in terms of their primary education needs, should they decide to sensibly change to a two-tier education system. And the other point that's been made to me very, very forcibly by staff, student, parents, children, not so much children, this one, is that for some children with small special educational needs, not ones that need massive one-to-one attention on a day or special education, for some of those children, there is a massive advantage in having the opportunity of attending a small village school for the sort of atmosphere, calm and peace that this can bring about. And to remove that possibility, I think, would be quite horrible. So I'm delighted that this campaign, that listening has happened, that the visits we've all done have been fruitful. And I do hope that this panel and cabinet will go along with what our redoubtable chair is suggesting. And today, on a good day, you're redoubtable.
No, yeah. Thank you, Judy. Thank you. And I hope actually when we come to the vote, it will be a unanimous decision. That would be very powerful. Paula, thank you, Judy. Paula.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm here. I'm just clicking buttons to so you can hear me. I'm really pleased to see that the governing body of this school took on board the numbers from 20, which were 26 at one point, and have done a huge marketing campaign. And we have now numbers of 43, 41, depends which one you look at. And I feel this is a strong governing body who have understood that it's important to market schools and to make sure that local people are aware of them. Also, looking at the new housing developments, there's one for nearly 500 homes just 5 minutes away at Barton-le-Clay, which I'm sure some of those small housing developments, which won't have their own school on site, will feed into the school, which will hopefully improve the numbers. So I think the school is in a good position, and with a strong governing body will hopefully increase its numbers and be a viable and obviously a very well appreciated school for local people. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Paula. Jan Madden.
Thank you, Terry. I had the absolute pleasure of visiting Hexton as well on their big party day that they had to celebrate I think it was the 175th anniversary. I was absolutely blown away by the staff, the governors, the local people who weren't even parents of children at the school who'd come in to support the school and spoke so passionately about this school. And I said on that day, I was talking to Mark Watkin actually at length that day about the school, and I said at the time, I felt that to close it now would be so short-sighted, because as Judy rightly alluded to, they're right on the border with Bedfordshire, and I really do believe that Bedfordshire will go to a two-tier system in the same way that we had this epiphany about Berkhamsted schools about 10 years ago when I was on education before. And when that happens, I absolutely believe that this school will fill up, because the problem that they've got is people move out of the school too early, or they don't come to the school because they know they're going to have to move out of the school too early. And I think that this problem will be resolved as soon as Bedfordshire goes to a two-tier, which it undoubtedly will at some point. But absolutely 100% support this.
Thank you very much indeed, Jan. Mark Watkin.
I shall keep this very brief, Terry, because so many people have said virtually everything I was going to say, and probably better than I would have said it myself. But as Jan said, I went to their 175th celebration and was absolutely amazed and just so deeply impressed by the sense of the whole community coming together. And because they're now going to be moving ahead, I believe this awful experience, because it must have been awful for them, is actually going to stimulate more energy, and it's hard to believe because there was so much energy on that day. But the confidence that they are now being supported, I think, will bode even better for the school in the future. I have to choose my words carefully because everything that David said about the school historically says that it could hardly have done better anyway. But I think in the modern world, to have this commitment absolutely up front will be the heart, the core of why the school will continue to flourish and grow. So I have absolutely no question about supporting this. I'm delighted to be able to do so.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Fiona Hill.
Thank you. Like everyone else, I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said, but delighted with the outcome of the consultation and very happy to support the recommendation being discussed. And just like some reassurance also from Simon that County will continue to support and monitor progress so that the governing body can succeed with all its plans for the future.
Simon, did you? I think I know the answer to that, but Simon, did you want to just make?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've made a commitment to the school that if the if your decision is that we don't proceed with the closure process, then to the extent that we can help them in their kind of journey towards a more sustainable future, then we definitely will. So I've arranged that I will, if it's appropriate, go and see the head in the early part of next term to talk about that further.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before we come to the recommendation and the vote, from my perspective, I have to say I was initially sceptical about whether Hexton could survive. I have been hugely impressed by the response, particularly of the governing body, and I'm very confident in the fact that the governing body knows where it wants to go. It has the right skills to take the school further and give it a sustainable future. And it's on that basis that I'm very pleased to make the recommendation. The panel is asked to recommend to Cabinet that it takes no further action on the closure proposal at this stage in the light of the governing body's request to give it time and opportunity to increase pupil numbers. So if you could vote for, against, or abstain, please. All I can say is, c'est magnifique. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
Frankly,
Thank
I
you,
wouldn't have
colleagues.
expected anything different, but there we are. Good. Okay. Let's move on now.
Old man, very happy. Thank you very much.
Good. Well, I wish you well, and I back to your bed and your sick bed, and I hope you recover quickly. Right. Let's move on to the next item, which is whether to publish a statutory notice on the proposal to close the residential provision at Falconer School, Bushy, which is a community special school from September 2022, and this relates to the residential provision I'll ask Simon to introduce it, and then I'll come to the local member, who is Lawrence Brass.
Yes, thank you, Terry. Yeah, as it says in the report, this residential provision has not been used since 2019, so it's effectively been out of commission. However, we would like formally to close it, not least because that gives us the opportunity to look at how we can use the accommodation released by that to increase the capacity of the school for day pupils in the longer term, and that's certainly an area of key need. But just to reassure you that this was never intended to be if you like, a residential special school. It wasn't that people stayed there all week and then, and then went home at the weekends. It was only intended to be for respite or independence or occasional use. But as I said, it's not been used since 2019, and I think there's an opportunity to use the accommodation better for other purposes.
Lawrence, you haven't put your hand up. Do I assume that you do want to speak?
Yes. Can I speak?
Yeah. But if you, to everybody, if you do want to speak, if you can use the hand up function. No, don't worry, Lawrence. I've already got you, but that's fine. All right, go ahead.
Very briefly, Chairman, Falconer School is indeed in Falconer Road, Bushy, which is the border between Bushy North and Bushy South. So, in fact, I represent the side of the road where the school is based, and our learned chairman, Seamus Quilty, sits on the other side, represents the other side of the road. But this is my side of the road, and I know Falconer School well. It's a marvellous institution which does terrific work. And I had a meeting last week with one of the former pupils. He's just left, and his parents, and they were saying that they don't even remember ever seeing any residential accommodation being utilised. I know it's now been 2 years, and I thought what was interesting was that the boy that has left said to me that the bedrooms that were earmarked for the residential use have been and ought to be used for other purposes to help the current day pupils. And I think on that basis, I'm very much in favour of this recommendation, and let's go ahead with it, and let's make sure that the extra space that will be opened up can be utilised to good advantage.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Lawrence. Mark Watkin.
Thank you very much, Terry. I suppose I've got two questions. Well, a comment and a question. I understand from Simon this has no impact on staffing because they have not been using dedicated staff to look after these, what would have been boarders or overnight accommodation. So I'm pleased to hear it has no negative effect on that side. I'm just wondering, does it also expand the capacity of the school in any shape or form in terms of number of pupils that it can support?
Simon?
He's gone.
I mean, it will expand it in due course, but obviously you can't immediately use bedrooms for teaching accommodation, so we'll have to do a project with the school to achieve a capacity expansion.
Well, if I can just come back and say that's another good reason we know the desperate need for special needs facilities and education where health and behaviour, the HBC, is one of those key areas. So anything that increases capacity and facility is to be supported. So I'll be happy to support this recommendation.
Thank you, Mark. I think my message to Simon and colleagues would be that once we conclude the closure of this particular facility in its formal sense, we press on at pace with the refurbishment and the reordering of the building internally to get the maximum utilisation out of it. I don't want it hanging around as just a shell for years to come. Caroline Clapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I've had the privilege of visiting Falconer School many times over the years. It's a wonderful school. The staff there do quite extraordinary things, actually. It's great to be a fly on the wall. Whenever I visited and spoken to students previously, I've never met a student who's actually used the residential facility, and that's going back 5 years. So I'm certainly supportive of this. If this gives an opportunity for the school to be able to increase its capacity and increase what it's doing, it provides a really, wonderful service, and I would fully support this. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, I don't think I've got anybody else wanting to speak. I think it's it's covered fully in the paper, so I don't think we need to actually spend any more time on it. It has everybody's full support, but I am going to ask you, please, formally to vote for, against, or abstain. Thank you very much indeed. That is agreed. Now we have 2 more items on the agenda. We have the North Herts ESC, and then we have the response to the motion, which was referred from full council. I think I am going to suggest that we take a short break now and then come back with item 6 in, let's say, 13 minutes time at 11:30. So if you leave your Teams meeting open, but turn your camera and your microphones off. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We move on now to item 6, which is whether or not to agree to the proposal to consolidate the North Herts Education Support Centre, otherwise known as the NHESC, onto one site in Letchworth from spring 2024. We have Tina, I think, who is the local member, and I will invite you, if you wish, Tina, to speak after Simon has presented the proposal in the paper. So, Simon, are you dealing with this, or is it Pauline Davis?
It's actually Pauline, so I'll hand over.
Right, Pauline, welcome.
Good morning. Yes, this report is about the outcome of consultation to consolidate this education support centre. It currently operates on 2 sites, one in Letchworth and one in Hitchin. And the proposal is to concentrate their operations onto a site in Letchworth to improve the facilities and their operation. If this is approved, we will be building a brand new building for this ESC, which will give them super accommodation. And it builds upon the work that we have been doing with a number of our ESCs. For example, when we moved the Park ESC in Hatfield into new premises, and also our plans for improving and extending the one in Stevenage. There were very few responses to a consultation, only 10, and the majority of those people agreed with the proposal. So this is technically, we call our education support centres such, but it is actually a pupil referral unit in DFE language, and as such, changes to pupil referral units aren't subject to the same statutory processes. So we are here asking today for a final decision about the consolidation of this ESC, and just to remind you that capital funding has already been approved in the IP to achieve that. We're happy to answer any questions. We do have Richard Woodard, the policy lead for ESCs, should you require it.
Thank you very much indeed, Pauline. Tina, one of the local members for the area, would you like to contribute, or would you like to ask a question, or the floor is yours?
I'd just like to share a bit about my opinion on this, please, Chair. That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So as Terry has said, I'm one of the local members for this item. A few months ago, you'll recall that I was in favour of this proposal due to the location and the ideal learning environment for the pupils. I'm really pleased that there's funding for this, and although the responses to the consultation are few, there has been thorough consultation and overall a very positive response at 90%. I'm also particularly glad to see that the management committee themselves support this too. So I hope the panel will recommend to Cabinet to approve the proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Tina. I have to say that to me this is an entirely sensible proposal. It provides, and the exciting thing is that it actually provides new accommodation at Letchworth for the ESC, rather than being in perhaps, shall we say, somewhat less favourable accommodation in other places. So I think it's a very good thing. I think it's an opportunity that we should grab and take forward. But let's hear now from, sorry, I'm not sure which one came first. I'm going to take Fiona Hill first.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm one of the other local members. Totally endorse all the comments you've made and Tina's made, and fully support the proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go now to Mark Watkin, please.
Thank you very much, Terry. Yes, I am very proud to be on the management committee of Chesbrook, another education support centre down in the south of the county, southwest of the county. I have seen just how life transforming a good ESC can be for the students who are referred to it. And the one thing it needs is good accommodation. And I think having everything under a central operation where the management and the delivery of the service can be even better controlled than it has been in the past must be a positive towards improving or making it even better. I don't want to suggest it is in any way less than good. So I welcome this, and I look forward to being able to visit it one day, maybe, and see in its new home. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Michael Muir.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I support everything that Mark's just said. He's taken the words from me. I know the old building there, Briar Patch, and I think a new building built specially for this school would be most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you again, Michael. And Judy.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, I'm also one of the local members, and although they weren't asked specifically in the consultation, I know quite a lot of Hitchin residents who I think will probably be quite pleased by this proposal, but I won't go into detail about why or how. I was a trustee of the North Herts Centre for quite a long time, and know the difficulties and the added costs of constantly operating across two sites. So I absolutely support this, but I would add, as I think I did last time, that there is now considerable interest in what might happen to the old Bancroft building in Hitchin. So please don't sneakily, County Council, go off and dispose of it without giving local opportunity to the people of Hitchin who might have really exciting plans about what could be done with it. Thank you.
Okay, Judy, and I'm sure that we've heard that comment as well. I don't see anybody else wishing to speak, so I'm going to ask you please to vote to recommend to Cabinet that we approve the proposal as identified in the panel paper. So if I could ask you to vote for, against or abstain. Thank you very much, everybody. That has been agreed. So now we come to the last item on the agenda, item 7, and this is the response to the motion that was submitted to full council. The motion being the building of a new secondary school in Bushey is not required. The proposer of that motion was Lawrence Brass. The way we are going to conduct this is that I am going to give Lawrence 5 minutes to speak to the motion. At the end of that, and this is not the same as how it would be in council. At the end of the 5 minutes, we will Lawrence will stop if he hasn't already stopped, and then we will go into normal process for the panel meeting. And as Lawrence is a member of the panel, he can continue, well, not continue to present his motion at all, but he can contribute to the discussion or the questioning as we go through. And you will see on the papers the recommendations. So, Lawrence, if you are ready.
I am.
We have a timer here, and you have 5 minutes. And as you know from earlier this morning, I am strict about the time. So, if you're ready, off you go.
Thank you, Chairman, colleagues. I've always been very passionate about education. Before I became a lawyer, I was a teacher, I was a school gardener for many years. But you know, delivering gold standard education isn't the same as throwing up needless buildings which the local community neither needs nor wants. Inexplicably, the county treats Radlett and Bushy as one unit for education purposes. No one knows why, and I won't go into that now. Hertsmere Council, prompted by the county, proposed the construction of a new 1900 pupil school on the site of our lovely Bushy Country Club earlier this year. There was a huge storm of protest. The idea was abandoned. The county blamed Hertsmere, Hertsmere blamed the county, and who knows? The problem is that we thought the saga of the fourth Bushy school had gone, but I'm told the county is still intent on foisting a new secondary school on Bushy, while Radlett gets none at all. And the purpose of this motion is to prove that such a plan is unnecessary. Colleagues, let me explain to you, there are probably more secondary schools in Bushy than anywhere else in Hertfordshire. There are 3 major state schools in a 1-mile radius. You've got Queen's School, which is the largest secondary school in the whole of Hertfordshire, Bushy Mead School, the Grange Academy. In addition, we have 2 specialist schools. We have Purcell School, a music school, and of course Falkner School, we spoke of earlier, a special needs school. There are 4 large independent schools in Bushy, and I accept that they're not available to everybody, but we have St Margaret's for girls, we have Emmanuel College for Jewish pupils, and we have Aldenham School and Haberdashers. What's important, I think, is, and I'll come back to the faith element if I am able to in the debate, of the 4,115 students currently attending the 3 public secondary schools in Bushy that I've mentioned, extraordinarily, only 27.5%, just over 1,000, are actually from Bushy. The other students come from all over the place: St Albans, Harrow, Watford, Radlett, Potters Bar, Boreham Wood. And this is in response to a Freedom of Information request obtained by the Bushy Forum. So I can tell you, colleagues, that we have 448 pupils currently attending Bushy schools, for example, from Boreham Wood and Radlett. Surely we should have a school, if anywhere, in that area. Well, what do the existing school heads say? I've been to see all of them. And every single head has asked me to tell this committee that he is opposed to this idea of a new school. And I want to particularly refer to one, Dr. Philip Hills, principal of Grange Academy. He made a very compelling argument to me against the imposition of another school. He told me Grange Academy, which is a fantastic state-of-the-art campus, cost 32 million quid, much more than I saw any new school would cost, has had a bit of a dodgy start. It's now beginning to move well, and it's been transformed. Dr. Hills says, and I agree with him, that if we actually were to build a new secondary school in Bushy, that would be the end of his establishment completely. 32 million quid, down the Swanee, end of story. And he's got large fields behind his campus to expand if it's necessary. So what do Bushy residents want? Well, the answer is only 27% of Bushy pupils, you know, I've told you, actually go to Bushy schools. No appetite in this area for a new secondary school. And more importantly, and this is the key, no infrastructure. We have Aldenham Road, Little Bushy Lane, London Road. These are roads which are already hugely congested. Try and come back and during the school closing and opening times, and Bushy's already clogged up. Another school will be a disaster. Hertsmere's local plan identifies 2 sites, one at Little Bushy Lane and one at Compass Park, to build a so-called school. Go down Little Bushy Lane now, you'll see an enormous green banner right across the length of Harts Farm, which says no to a new school in Bushy, and I agree with that. Now, unlike in Bushy, there is a lack of provision for secondary schools from Radlett and Shendley, when there isn't a single secondary school, and I think Elstree and Boreham Wood also very poorly served. Hertswood Academy in Boreham Wood, previously unpopular, has now improved, and there's no secondary school in Oxley at all. 3 Rivers want a secondary school in Carpenter's Park, but I say there's only one place it should be built, and that's in Radlett, if it's even necessary. Now, I would explain where I want it in Radlett if I'm allowed to during the debate, but My argument, which I want people to listen to carefully, is why should everyone from Radlett travel to Bushey and not vice versa? A new secondary school in Radlett, distinct from Bushey, would encourage cycling, walking to school, reduce carbon emissions for the 73% of students who I believe don't come from Bushey.
Thank you, Lawrence.
So for these reasons, Chairman, I urge the panel to support this motion.
Lawrence.
I finished.
I know, but I did stop. I did speak and ask you to stop at 5 minutes and not go over when I was saying to you to stop.
I have stopped.
Right. Let us now go to Dan Hardy to present the paper that has been circulated as part of the panel papers for today.
Good morning.
Dan?
Thanks, Terry. So I think if we start, the paper sets out the current and proposed position in and around the Bushey area. Obviously, at present, there are no plans to build a new secondary school in Watford. Nothing in the short term or within the forecast period, and obviously any proposals to do so would be brought before panel and cabinet. However, the County Council has for a number of years set out as part of its responses to growth proposals in the area the need for new school sites to be identified to ensure that long-term demand can be met in the future. So if we look at the area centred around Watford, currently across Hertsmere, Three Rivers and Watford itself, there are over 21,000 new dwellings proposed in that area. That's a huge increase in the number of potential families. That's a community almost the size of a whole new town such as Bishop Stortford. That level of development, if it comes forward, will obviously require supporting infrastructure, school places for new residents. So as part of our responses, we've identified that there are broadly 3 new school sites required. Watford Borough Council itself has been unable to identify any suitable land within its boundary for new schools. So of necessity, we've been looking in the areas immediately adjacent. So the council has already acquired Carpenter's Park to the south of Watford, and that site is being promoted as to Three Rivers as part of its plan, and to the west of Watford in Croxley Green, the new Croxley Danes School opened recently to support the wave of growth currently moving through the school system. We've also identified, therefore, that the other 2 potential locations for new secondary school are Abbots Langley to the north, or to the and the west of Hertsmere, in the sort of a bushy area, looking for a site that's accessible and sustainable in both education and transport terms. Bushy itself has almost 3,000 new homes proposed, and as part of technical work to support the local plan, site searchers have identified 2 sites within Bushy itself that might be appropriate for new schools, and that information has been shared with Hertsmere to enable it to consider the most appropriate location. And the County Council will obviously work with Hertsmere before the next iteration of its local plan to help it identify where the most appropriate location for a school will be.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Can I just ask you, what steps have you been taking, or has Hertfordshire been taking, to liaise with Watford and indeed Three Rivers in terms of providing secondary school accommodation?
So we work obviously closely with all three districts and have been in regular contact with them through the local plan process, both responding formally to their growth scenarios and providing information to the districts about the likely impact of the growth proposals that they've set out. The County Council has entered into a statement of common ground with Watford Borough Council, which recognises that the borough isn't able to provide secondary school sites within its own boundary, and that therefore sites will need to be identified in adjacent areas. And again, we've also recently entered into a statement of common ground with Hertsmere Borough Council, again agreeing that a site needs to be identified in the west of the district to serve that strategic need arising not only from its proposals in Bushy and in Radlett, but also from growth that's arising in Watford.
Okay, I think I'm right in saying that Watford has got a huge development area, hasn't it? And in terms of numbers, and if I think I'm not sure if it's in the paper or my recollection is that something like 26 forms of entry in the secondary sector are going to be required to sustain young people in Watford. Is that correct?
That is so over 13,000 of those 21,000 homes are proposed in Watford itself. We would want to plan, as you say, to ensure we could deliver up to 26 forms of entry just for Watford itself, to ensure that those children will be able to access school places in the long term. And you do feel a level of sympathy for Watford, and Mark Watkin will correct me, but I think I'm right in saying that Watford is the smallest borough in the country, and yet it has this huge development potential. I may be wrong. Judy's shaking her head. So, Mark, am I right? Mark Watkin, am I right or have I got it wrong?
Terry, if you want to put your name to our local leaflets supporting less development in Watford, we'll be glad to quote you. I think everything you've just said is spot on. I mean, and you know, we just have not got any room. The only way we can accommodate the growth is we're going skywards. So we're now actually having to agree to 23-storey tower blocks going up in the borough simply to accommodate the growth that we're being forced to. And I tell you, we are very opposed to this because we think it distorts our community. And unfortunately, the trade-off is that our neighbouring authorities are then going to have to pick up the education demand for secondary schools, because there is no way in Watford that we can build another secondary school. There really isn't.
Thanks for the clarification.
And I reserve the right to come back later on, by the way, Chair. That wasn't
okay. No. That's well. There isn't it's not a formal motion with a reserved right, but obviously, as a member of the panel, if you put your hand up, of course I will call you. Absolutely. And I wasn't offering you a quote either. Let me go to Caroline Clapper now.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to give kind of a bit of my 2 pennies worth as a Hertsmere councillor. I mean, I personally believe that Bushy is extremely well served with regards to secondary schools. I mean, you know, Lawrence has spelt out the schools that we've got, but extremely well served for Bushy children. You know, he talked about the low percentage. If we have a huge increase in demand in building in Bushy, then it means that more children from Bushy will actually be going to those Bushy schools. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the area who aren't, one of the schools he mentioned is the Grange Academy. That's the school that I suppose is kind of closest to Watford Borough. And we already take a huge amount of children from the Watford area. Now, our roads are solid traffic-wise, our infrastructure is lacking in elements, and I just feel that we are really shouldering the burden. You know, if we're talking about taking even more kids from Watford, I know that there have been discussions about all these other schools, for example, Carpenter's Park, Croxley Green, Abbots Langley. I even remember being in a meeting where somebody was talking about the possibility of building a secondary school on the excess land at Watford General Hospital. I don't know if any of the officers know about that, but that was a discussion somebody was talking about recently to service Watford. But I just feel like, you know, we are, and it's not saying that I don't believe in a duty to cooperate. I think it's fantastic that all the boroughs are working together. Having said that, I feel as if we are already in that situation. We are already shouldering this burden. We are already bringing in lots of students. And talking once again with my, you know, environment and sustainability hat on, you know, how good is it actually that all these students are having to travel such a significant distance, whether it's by car or, you know, whatever other facilities. I don't see that many kids cycling to Grange Academy up from Watford. It's quite a steep hill, so, you know, I can understand. But I think we also need to be cognizant of our responsibility with regards to the environment, and, you know, creating the thought of creating another secondary school here that is specifically to service another borough where already we've got such a small percentage of our own Hertsmere residents going to school here, and we are already doing that. We're already shouldering the burden. Personally, I would agree with the points put forward, and I would hope that the officers would take my views on board as a Hertsmere councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Lawrence, I will come to you. Before I do, I just need to make it clear that this is not an opportunity for you to continue with the presentation of your motion. And I would also say to you, or request that you respect the chair, and that if I say time up or stop now, you actually stop now and you don't continue speaking over the chair. So with those points made by me to you, please continue.
Chairman, thank you very much. I was really gratified to hear Caroline Clapper's supportive remarks, which I hugely appreciated. I only just wanted to raise 2 points which the panel might feel are helpful. One is about faith issues. Bushey is now become an area which is one of the largest Jewish communities in the UK, and many of our local children go to Jewish state schools outside, JFS, Yavne College, JCOS. I have 4 grandchildren living in Bushey, none of whom go to school in Bushey. They all go to Jewish state schools out in the borough of Kenton. So that's another reason why Bushey doesn't need a school. And the other point I wanted to ask Mr. Hardy to assist me with is, I think I mentioned to you, Dan, that I actually identified a site in Radlett where if you got to have a school, and I don't think this is necessary, if you got to have a school, it would be the ideal spot. Did you have a chance to look at Kempro Farm, opposite Fairfield Junior School on the Watford Road? It's 35 hectares, it's available, it's an identifiable space, it would be an ideal spot, I think, if you needed a school for the Radlett Bushey unit, and why it's at 1 unit. Those. What do you think about using that if you have to have a school anywhere?
Dan?
The Kempro Farm site is currently being proposed within Hertsmere's draft plan as a housing site. It hasn't previously been identified within the technical searches as a appropriate secondary school site. That can obviously be revisited through the work in the coming months to ensure that that's the case. My recollection is that when it was looked at previously, it scored less well than sites in Bushey for a variety of town planning and also highway access reasons.
I think it's fair to say, is it not, Dan, that what we're talking about here, and of course the recommendation is simply to note the contents of the report, which is what we will be asking colleagues to do. But this is something, and these planning proposals are years in advance, and we are very much at really quite an early stage in both the Hertsmere local plan and indeed the Watford local plan in broad terms. Is that a fair comment to make?
Absolutely. I think the Watford plan is more advanced than both Hertsmere and Three Rivers. It's now been submitted for examination, whereas both Hertsmere and Three Rivers are only at the Regulation 18 stage and are still working through what their proposals will ultimately look like. I think you're right, though, this is a process. There is still a long way to go in terms of getting to a determined plan. And I will reiterate the point I made at the start, that this is very much about the long-term horizon. This is not about bringing forward a school now. The County Council wouldn't, of course, look to provide provision where there are already high levels of surplus or surpluses, referring to existing schools being concerned about having places. New provision would be provided in line with rising demand as and when and if needed. But this is very much about ensuring that any growth in the area is sustainable, that we can bring forward places when we need to at an appropriate time to enable children to have access to the facilities they need.
And I think am I right in thinking also, Dan, that any new school would have to be met, the funding for any new school construction would have to be met from Section 106 contributions or indeed from basic need. And of course, it would have to have some level of approval from central government to allow a school to be built in any event, would it not?
Yes, I mean, we are talking about a longer term horizon, Terry, and I'm not sure that with some of the proposed reforms, we know exactly what Section 106, for example, will look like in 5-10 years time. But certainly, funding will need to be identified, and there will be a approval process to go through. And the current expectation is that it would be within the government approval framework that we're working within at the moment.
And you've mentioned a horizon timeline of 10-15 years or thereabouts. It's not an immediate requirement by any manner of means. I think that's fair.
Exactly so. It's very much about safeguarding land to ensure that the ability to bring forward those facilities in the future, not about doing something now.
Indeed. Let me go to Paula. Paula Hiscox.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually quite disappointed with Watford. They're building a lot of homes and they really haven't put consideration into how they're going to educate the children who live in that borough. We have the 23 tower block going up right on the edge of Three Rivers, which I'm sure will have a lot of families housed in it. And housing we need, but we also need education. From the Three Rivers point of view, I very much welcome the 2 schools in Abbots Langley and Carpenter's Park, which may or may not happen, but the land is being earmarked from what you're saying, Dan. We've always sent a lot of our children. I'm Rickmansworth, and I know children that travel to Bushey for their schools, taking 2 buses. We now have the Reach Free School, and the new Croxley Danes, which has obviously taken up some of those children. And I'm sure if we have 2 more schools in Three Rivers, children that were going to Bushey will actually be sustainable, be able to walk to school, cycle to school and use those schools. I really can't comment on the children that need to access the north of Bushey, the sort of Radlett, that area. But from Three Rivers, I'm hoping that local schools in our district would ease some of the problem on the Bushey schools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Paula. Chris Lloyd.
Yeah, I think we have several of us from this end of the county, both in Watford and in Bushey, and this matter of secondary school places has been something that I've been interested in since the 90s when I was looking at bringing in the coordinated admission system. But obviously we have a crisis in Watford, Dan, that the government, in my view, shouldn't be putting that number of houses, because we will have children having to go, you know, in the ideal place. We want our children to be able to walk to school. So obviously 30 odd years ago, there was a school closed in South Oxley, which is why the children of Oxley Hall and Carpenter's Park and South Oxley, many of them go to Bushy. Some of them come to other parts of Three Rivers, but there isn't, you know, a logical connection. So I think that's one of our challenges, because in the ideal world, I think all our schools in Hertfordshire are good schools. You cannot actually expand many of the ones in Watford. I pushed, and Watford Boys was expanded, I think, about 20 years ago. That isn't possible at Watford Girls. Obviously, the county and the government worked to rebuild Westfield, and that has expanded. I don't think there's necessarily much more room. I can't comment on the different, whether it's Radlett or Bushy, but I can comment that I do understand and listen to the Hertsmere members that you do have a lot of children who are not local coming to your school. So we obviously need to find school provision. I do support a school in the Carpenter's Park area, and I do support something in the Abbots Langley area, and I'm listening to the debate. And obviously we need somewhere for all of our children, and I think we also need to be saying to the government, we don't want any more houses in Watford, because it does actually have an impact on Hertsmere. It will have an impact on Dacorum, St Albans and on Three Rivers. These children will not be able to walk to school, and I don't think that's environmentally sustainable. And I also, like Paula, do not like the 23-storey block in Watford, Mark, I'm afraid. I can see that from where I live, and I'm not impressed, but I appreciate that central government have forced you into it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Chris. Just as a matter of interest, there were 2 secondary schools in South Oxley actually originally, both of which closed. I'm going to take Christopher Alley before I go back to Lawrence. So, Christopher,
Chairman, I only wanted to ask a point of information.
No, Lawrence.
Okay.
Let me take Christopher Alley, and then I'll come back to you.
All right.
Christopher.
Hi, thank you for this, Terry. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I just want to reiterate a lot of the sentiments that everybody else has said. There is a lot of pressure on secondary schools, particularly with some historically being closed, particularly my patch, South Oxley. You're right, Terry. There were 2 shut down a few years ago, which have now had repercussions. But you know, I think it's down to local authorities to see this and foresight this. And mentioning central government forcing numbers, the local plan is there. The local plan that was delayed in TRD, your DC, and at Borough. The local plan, that is where proposals for challenging the government's targets are meant to be. That's where you're meant to say, we don't want this many houses, or we can't do it because of the school places. That would be a perfect place to do it. Instead, we're blaming the government. Fundamentally, we have to get to grips with this issue. I think we do need more secondary schools just because of that. And I don't think we need to start playing in national politics when actually it's a local issue, where it was our TRDC and Borough's Watford Borough's responsibility to push back at government, but they failed to do so. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Chris. I mean, it's fair to say that whilst a local authority is in a Regulation 18 consultation period, there is an opportunity to some extent to vary or to challenge the numbers coming down from central government to some extent. Right, Lawrence. You
I wanted to ask a point of information, Chairman, if you don't mind. Can I have your assurance that there will be a vote on the motion that I proposed at the main council meeting?
No, there won't be.
There won't be a vote on my motion?
No.
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 I'm astonished.
No, it was referred to this panel, and the recommendation will be that the panel notes the contents of the report. That is what we will vote on.
So my motion that there be no secondary school in Bushy will not be allowed to be put to the vote?
As in that context, no, it will not be. because it's not the way it works at this panel, and it's not the way that the referral of a motion to a panel operates, and that is not something which is unique to this panel, but to all the panels and all motions which are referred.
I mean, to note it is just a smudge, isn't it? I mean, I wanted actually some firm policy to be agreed today. Obviously, it's not going to happen. This is ludicrous. But there you are. Perhaps Mr. Watkin might have.
That is not a matter for this panel. That is a matter for leaders to consider if this is the right way to consider dealing with motions at full council. And I'm not going to make any further comment upon that. I'm going to concentrate purely on the response to the motion, and that is what we are talking about today. Mark.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And I'm not going to rise to the challenge from others about how Watford is just rolling over and accepting the numbers. We are fighting back. But the truth of the matter is that we can't, when we make decisions about particular applications, take into account the facilities, the resources that have to be there to support them. That in fact falls to other areas such as the County Council for Education or utilities if it's water supply or whatever. I just wanted to go back, if I may, to the Hertsmere local plan, because I'm sort of confused here, because the Hertsmere local plan has a report from Vincent and Gorbing on behalf of County Council, and they refer to two sites, one at 10 Formentary in Boreham Wood, which I don't think Dan mentioned, and then another site which is really in the Bushy area and is where the Bushy Country Club site comes from. But they mentioned, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 sites potentially, which they had considered and for numbers of reasons rejected a number of them, but not one of them is the site that Lawrence has particularly referred to. And the argument is, they say that there is a need, there's an absence of secondary schools in Radlett. It's a key issue, they identify it. But then they argue that there isn't enough local children, aren't enough local children to support such a school. Whereas we've been hearing all through this debate, the fact that children do move around the area and to take a very narrow view and so one small community can't support a school is just, it flies in the face of facts, which are that we are moving children around. And as Lawrence has quite clearly said, if you put a school there, it would actually act as a focal point to stop the children from Radlett and Boreham Wood going, having to travel an Elstree, having to travel into Watford or Bushy. So that's really, I think, the key point I wanted to make. I am, like Lawrence, really disappointed that this is, in a sense, a token debate. It's token because were this in full council, there would be a proper vote and it would have been recorded. We could say yay or nay, the council's accepted or it hasn't. This is just, dare I say it, an exercise, and you can believe that we'll be taking it up with Stephen Giles Medhurst. And I appreciate, Chair, you're reflecting what appears to be orders of business handed down to you, but what on earth is the point in Lawrence going to the work to propose a motion simply to be told that officer's report will be noted? I mean, does that not strike you as well, undemocratic at least, and certainly irrational? So I don't often get angry, but I am particularly angry that this is just being dismissed. All that work, all the support that he would expect to be getting from residents, and no doubt has been telling residents that they'll be getting a hearing, and no doubt we've got people actually attending this meeting for the very purpose of understanding whether their case has been heard and supported or not. No, all we're going to be told is we have to support Dan's paper. Well, I suppose the only thing we can say is we're not going to support that either. We might as well at least show some way of showing our disappointment at this process. And we will definitely take it up with group leaders, because this is just absurd. This is not democratic. This is actually farming something putting it into a siding and quietly letting it be forgotten. But I go back to the substantive points. The Bushy local plan does not refer to this, and I wonder whether the responsibility lies with the local plan or with the county council, and maybe Dan can clarify that point for me.
Dan? would you like to respond to that? But you are on mute.
Okay, Mark, I think you covered quite a lot there, Mark, so I'll try and pick up the points. I think you mentioned Boreham Wood. That's obviously treated as a more discrete area in this sense, with its own growth proposals within Hertsmere, and similar to the position we're taking elsewhere. We're trying to and have identified a school site to protect against long-term growth. Again, as we touched on earlier, there are sufficient places in the system at the moment in that area, so we aren't looking for anything at the moment. This is about protecting the ability to bring forward provision in the future. In terms of the technical work, I think you rightly say that Vincent and Gorbing have supported the process, so completed a very detailed and technical piece of work looking at sites. I think they had a short list of 4 sites within Bushy, but with 2 being more preferred, 2 less preferred. The 2 more preferred sites were the ones that Hertsmere has referred to in its draft local plan as potential sites. So they've obviously taken that on board. Pupil dynamics, I think, in the southwest are, as you say, a bit more complex due to the admission rules, including selection on ability, aptitude, faith, that yes, do mean pupils can travel between areas of school, but we know that Watford is an exporter to both Bushy and to Three Rivers. There are more children in Watford than there are secondary school places available. So that is a natural consequence of that, unfortunately. And short of being able to identify provision within Watford itself, it's going to be very, very challenging to have anything other than that growth supported in adjacent areas. It is worth noting that we've expanded schools in Watford to the maximum extent. Both Watford Boys, Watford Girls, Westfield Academy, and even St Michael's have offered additional places. But we're still at a point where there's, I think, around over 1,300 primary school places in Watford and only 700 secondary school places. In terms of locating a secondary school in the west of Hertsmere, and whether that is Bushy, we've talked about Radlett. I mean, Radlett has relatively few children transferring to secondary school each year. Currently, there's around 2 forms of entry worth of Radlett children year on year at Hertfordshire secondary schools. And they're spread across quite a wide area, and we know that a lot of those parents will look at high performing existing schools, such as Dame Alice Owen, Watford Boys, Girls, Parmitters, and it's entirely possible that pattern of preferences would continue even if there was local provision available. That means that a school in that location would need to import a significant number of children to be viable. Generally, we've got a preference for secondary schools between 6 and 10 forms of entry, because that is a size we think ensures the schools can be financially viable, offer a broad curriculum, and also have a viable 6th form, which is really important for parity of esteem and the overall offer. So where we see a local base, of somewhere perhaps between 1 and 2 forms of entry, that does mean that a school would have to import quite a significant proportion of its pupils from outside. So we just need to be very careful about that any proposals for a school in small settlements are sustainable in the long term, you know, in education terms and also in travel terms. And hopefully, Mark, that's picked up everything. But if there's anything I've missed, do let me know.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any more hands. So I think that we need to just go to the recommendation, which is that the panel notes the contents of this report. I think what I have to just say in response to Mark Watkins' comment that I am merely going by the procedures that are laid down. It's not for me to make any comment on those, save that any change to procedures and the constitution would be a matter for group leaders and not for me. So somebody has put a note in the chat, I think. No. Right, so if we can go to the recommendation that the panel notes the contents of this report, for, against or abstain, please. Thank you very much indeed. The recommendation is accepted and agreed. That brings us to the end of the meeting business for today. Thank you all very much indeed for your attendance. And the date of the next Education, Libraries and Lifelong Learning Cabinet Panel is the 9th of February 2022. So on which, thank you all for your attendance. Thank you for your contribution.
Not much point in coming to the next meeting, Chairman, if you know.